Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, greetings and welcome back. I'm trying to keep these a little bit more condensed. Some will be shorter, some will be probably the same length. Um, I wanted to touch on the 1 year marking of the attempt to end, at the time, candidate Trump, now President Trump, and how such traumatic events can influence somebody, and that hasn't been discussed as much. And calling out those who are in positions to do the due diligence investigations, not following through with that, or at least not seeming to. Um, One thing I wanted to touch on that was local is the previous video that was uploaded. I had discussed a traumatic event with one of the chickens. I had some stuff dangling for them to play with. I have a little ball with a bell in it that they can knock around. I have a laser light that we would use with cats for them to chase around, and been introducing bugs and mealworms and such to them. And unfortunately, you can't see it because the mezzanine camera, the chickens are blocking it. But right underneath the mezzanine, they're one in particular is jumping. Three of them are jumping, but it's as if jumping to bite the tail feather of the one in order to either pull it down or pull herself up. Last night, the same thing happened. Put the chicken, after doing that repeatedly, I picked up the chicken, put it on the ramp leading up to the high mezzanine. But I don't know, I find this stuff comical. I don't know what's going on. And earlier, they ripped a piece of cardboard and were doing the football thing. Running around with it, grabbing at it, stealing it from the other. Then they ran back and forth. So they're very amusing. They are amusing enough that they captivate the cat's attention. Took one on the porch yesterday morning. I believe it was the one that had the tongue and string issue that I was able to remedy. Anyway, the fact that I can't tell for certain tells you that, yes, they are recovering well. That, drinking, eating, I haven't noticed any changes in any of them. So, I wanted to give you a follow-up that, yes, in the last couple days since that happened, the trauma of the event lives with me, not so much with the one that it had happened. And look at that. What you can't see with the camera at this, is that part of the reason I suspect that they are all fighting for the camera isn't because they know it's a camera, obviously. It's because the door is open and letting natural light in. And they're excited about the natural light coming in from the outside. It's a beautiful day out there. I suspect it's going to be about 90 degrees. Yesterday, around 3 o'clock, it was about 90 degrees. And for the Pacific Northwest, that's a lot. Being in other regions, the East Coast, for example, there's no comparison. That is very muggy, very uncomfortable. Very weird to live in an environment where it's 97% humidity and a 95-degree day, and it's not comfortable at all. If it weren't for the prevalence of air conditioning in those apartments, in those places, in those motels and hotels, I don't know how anybody was able to survive prior to that. But I digress. I wanted to give you an update on the chicken. Chicken's doing fine. They're excited to look outside. I have a modification I want to do to my gate before I let them out there. So once that's done, then I'll probably start letting them out there. I'm not certain how this is going to go. You know, if I'm going to need to go get a child gate, you know, those stretchy gates that you put to keep children from tumbling downstairs or going into rooms they needn't be. And the reason I'm speaking about that is with the chickens, they jump, they flap their wings and get a little bit more height with their jump that way. But a gate would keep them from being able to run back inside my place, keep them contained on the porch, and potentially would allow me to hang it in front of their nesting beds. So if I needed to do something to keep them contained, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud the options which could exist, things that I intend to do. The string thing was a lesson, so I've been examining my porch to make certain that there aren't any items to which they could get themselves snagged on, caught on, and it'll be an experiment, you know, to find out what needs to be further modified for their protection. There was a meme. I don't really want to call it a meme because when I think of memes, I think of poignantly and painfully funny commentary on society. As this is more of an informative, and that is the bird, the picture of the bird, and then the commentary written underneath it stating that I want to call it a herbicide, but that's not the word I'm looking for. The pesticides, you know, maybe it is the herbicides. The herbicides, pesticides, all those forever chemicals, you know, these things have killed the bugs, the worms, the grass, tainted the soil, tainted the water. Now I can't eat, can't drink, I'm growing weak. And my comment to that was it's not enough just to get, you know, you get something such as chickens, right? And you do what you can to protect them. You get a chicken coop to keep them contained. But then you put them out there in the chicken coop only to find out, as the people of East Palestine found out a year and a half ago, all it takes is one train derailment for your entire flock to be ended. So it's not enough just to keep them physically safe. It's all these other measures you have to take into account to accommodate their safety without compromising their freedom. You know, their freedom to at least goof off and move around. You hear those stories about how they're kept in those individual cages, unable to get up and move around. They just keep them penned up and, you know, laying eggs. And now, even this cat kennel is getting to be, in my opinion, too small. And they're able to move around, you know, climb up to the mezzanines and run around, drink their water, eat their food, eat their bugs and mealworms, and jump around, play chicken football. But I would like for them to have a little bit more room, but not if it means them being somehow, you know, injured. Yeah. As I told somebody else, when it comes to children and animals, I'm a softie. I don't like either of those groups being wrongfully harmed. I don't like them being harmed. Reprimanded is one thing, harmed is another. Anyway, I digress. I don't want to ramble another 20 minutes. I just wanted to touch base on what it is I'm attempting to do. So let's see what is up with today's commentary. I think I'll skip this one. I suspect I've already seen it.
The smartest men hold out on marriage as long as possible, if forever, because you really don't know who she is until she gets leverage on you.
Pearl summed it up perfectly. Marriage is leverage for women. Guys, don't underestimate the power of this statement. Marriage changes the power dynamic in a relationship in favor of the female.
This is off of Sigma Traits, and I don't know if I've said it before, the Sigma Traits channel, the Sigma Male channel, Manhood channel, the three of them consistently provide information, but it's delivered in such a way that I'm curious if it's done by somebody who's not a native English speaker and they use a vocal tool such as the 11 Labs or something to do their script delivery, or if it's completely AI generated. I don't know. But some of these points that they bring up are worth considering, and this one directly is accurate, and that is, oh, why don't you open up? You know, men open up all the time. There is no reservation about that. All you have to do is watch what it is that they do, what it is that they laugh about, what it is that they ignore. You'll figure out what it is that motivates them rapidly. As I have told female relatives, when it comes to men, they really have a simple operating process, and that is, you know, as many have called it, keep the bowls empty, keep the belly full, keep the home, you know, maintained. Those are the top three. The next is be available to do horizontal acrobatics. Be, you know, do what you can to maintain who you were when you met, to be, you know, to remain attractive, and ultimately be a good parent to the children that are produced, and recognize that what it is you're doing is for them, the children. Never tell the children that, otherwise they'll start becoming overinflated egos. But you do what you do to provide stability and security for them to grow up in a healthy environment that allows them to learn and grow. As children aren't, you know, the best description for them, number one is, whether you like them or not, is the Bill Cosby thing, is your heart running around outside your body. And number two, they are adults in training. Apprentice, you know, they are apprentice to become an adult. And that is your role as the parent, as the family member, as the mentor, the teacher, the guide, is to foster that development in a manner that they learn it and they become a master at that ability. But the way our laws are set up, the way our society is set up, and I've said it before, the Great Society was the test bed to do it on minority populations, and that was, if you kick the man out of the home, we will financially support you, we being the government. So the minority families began taking action to remove the father from the home, and the government stepped in to provide the WIC, which is an acronym for Women, Infants, Children, to provide Head Start, provide food stamps, the EBT, the housing, the Section 8 housing, the HUD, health, housing and urban development, the medical. The government stepped in, and it was such a success that it went mainstream in the 70s that they began pushing for households across America to push the fathers out. It was revised in the mid-90s and during the Clinton years. And we're still suffering the consequences of it now. And I've mentioned it before, and my math could be wrong, but you go to family court. Number one, there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of statements, and whether it's true or not, I don't know. But the more you start studying the law, the more you start finding out a lot of the legal stuff is done by contracts. By participating, you're entering into contracts and then I need to pull it up one of these days so I can show you. But if you read the Social Security Act that deals with child support in particular, it clearly states only federal employees and are to participate in this because it's a federal. You have to be a federal employee. It clearly states that. And the other one is they're not even allowed to be judges. You can't to preside. They can't be an actual judge. They can be an administrator. They can be a lawyer. But they go through the whole performance as if they are a judge. I've heard commentary that the rooms are rented. So it's they rent the courtroom so as to give the appearance of legitimacy, but it's rented and therefore it's not. I don't know if that's true or not. Everybody claims, oh, I've seen the contract, but I've never seen anybody actually present the contract. There's a guy, Vet Father Bill, on X who hosts a morning thing, and I was invited to participate, to listen, and there was an individual who made such a claim. Oh, I've seen the contract, but when it came, to push comes to shove, she couldn't produce it. And it was such a woe is me, woe is this, and woe is that kind of online thing. It was guys, we're supposed to be talking about how to work the system, identify it, call it out, and get it addressed so that it can be remedied via the legislature. And if they're not going to take that seriously, then we start suing. Not oh, I've got the proof, I just don't have it with me, and I'm just not going to go get it and present it. That doesn't work for me. I deal with far too many people that, and the lack of, it's lying. They are lying, and they're saying that they've seen it to get validation of, oh, Jerry said she has it. No, unless she's got it in her hand, and I'm reading it and can look at the statutes that are referenced and verify it. No, she doesn't. She's lying. And I made a comment that's like, on his group, because to be able to speak, you had to raise your hand, and I have no idea how you raise your hand in a Twitter space. So I wrote a comment that essentially that it was a waste of time to do this hand-wringing nonsense. And don't get me wrong, Vet Father Bill does, provides good information. His goal is very, very worthy, and that is to provide DV shelters for men and boys, because apparently in America there's only two, and if I understand it correctly, they're privately funded. Thousands of women's shelters exist for women and girls, but if the boys are 12 years of age and older, they're not allowed. That's my understanding. I could be mistaken. I'm not an expert. I'm not a DV person. I see the signs of drama, and I do what I can to separate myself from it, because my time is far too valuable to be swept up with it. And some of you get caught up in it, and it's unfortunate. Unfortunately, we don't always get to pick and choose our associations, and it's sometimes difficult to avoid those. But if you can, avoid it. Alright, so going back to it. It's a long, dry read. There was something called KH Coder, Kilo Hotel Coder, that I was using to help analyze Social Security Act for that section. But my abilities weren't up to the task. There are others who have dissected that act. Amon Osiris contends that the Social Security Act was never made into what's called positive law, but it's been put in place as if it were. Therefore, since it's not been properly legislated, that it doesn't apply. Well, that's great, but we use, court precedent. What previous courts have ruled is what makes things binding. So whether it's based on positive law or not, my understanding is that's not what's relevant. What is relevant is if you can cite an existing court case that says X. And one of the most infamous is the Blessing versus Freestone, that deals with the families suing Arizona for money because they claimed it was their right. And Sandra Day O'Connor, who was, if I'm not mistaken, was the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court by Reagan, was the one that stated there is no individual right to child support, that it is an attempt to recoup monies spent by the government. So what it is you have one party who's being a leech upon society, and the government, paying that money, to that leech, and then turning around with threat of force and violence to collect from another party to subsidize an incompetence mentis, an incompetent adult. The motivation behind that is the financial bonus that the government parties receive by participating. And that's where the 66 cents on the dollar comes in. The federal government gives 66 cents for every dollar, or for every $1,000, $666 for every financial debt order they place. This is the reason that so many men wrongly are put on these burdensome. This is why you see the cases of $25,000 a month for NBA stars or actors. It's because whoever made that financial obligation order is now in the top tier of the bonus payout from the federal government. Do the math on it. $25,000 a month. If you're getting $666 for every 1,000, all right? So let's do the simple math. That's 1,000 if it were 100,000. You divide that by 4, right? You divide 66 by 4. You're looking at about $11,000 or $12,000 a month that court, that quote-unquote judge, is receiving as a financial bonus from the federal government for making that obligation order. Is this beginning to make sense to all of you out there? This is nothing more than money laundering. This is nothing more than creating punitive barriers for success. And if you think that's bad, look up private prisons and the numbers of judges that are invested in those private prisons and what the bed count minimum is for the operation. A private prison, for simple math, is going to have 100 beds. They have in their contract, whether or not the beds are filled, they will charge that jurisdiction for a minimum of 70 beds being occupied. So not only are the judges invested in this private prison, now they're financially incentivized to make certain that at minimum 70 of those beds are occupied to justify the cost. Otherwise, the contract's not going to be renewed. You got to think about it that way, or it's going to be revised the next negotiation. The other part is there again it exists federal incentives for every incarceration. Do you think that the DARE drug alcohol resistance education, do you think it truly came out of goodwill? It came as a result of federal intervention to control behavior, and so what happens is you get this federal mandate, the 55 miles an hour speed limit, the raising of the drinking age to 21, all of these other punitive actions such as no leniency in the court, for first time, second time, third time, whatever infraction of being chemically altered, in an altered state. I'm old enough that I've talked to guys who have gone to court in the 70s and said, yep, it's my first time, they dismissed it, and then overnight it changed. Everybody I knew, their first time, they ended up in prison and they lost their vehicle, they lost their home. We all hear stories about the guy that was smoking a doobie on the fort, losing it all, getting locked up for 20 years. We've all heard stories of such action. But society, yeah, whatever. Society ran well for thousands of years. If you can't separate what ran well for thousands of years with what is essentially money laundering now, I can't help you. You've got to be able to recognize it for what it is, and that is money laundering. It is an attempt to launder money from the taxpayers, from the reserve, which isn't a reserve, into the pockets of government actors, because government actors get paid a certain amount, but in order to break free, they get incentive bonus payments. And this is how they get around the public disclosure of what a GS this and that made, is by not including their incentive bonus payouts. They exist, but you got to dig deeper. You got to know how to read what's called a CAFR, and that's the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. You have to know how to locate it. You need to know how to request it. So again, I'm getting a little deep in the weeds because this isn't really addressing the issue of marriage being punitive for men. But I'm trying to describe to you what it is, the machinery that goes on behind all of this, as to how come it's so skewed. Number one, it's because men keep entering into it. it's becoming less and less, but they still enter into it. Number two, there's no opportunity or desire to reform it. You've got instead Scott Galloway. Oh, come on, man, be a pay pig for that single mom out there who's already told you you got to pay for her 3 SUVs and her kids and deal with her 3 exes, and it's all your fault for not doing that. And you got Mike Johnson saying, you need to get out of the basement and stop playing video games that you've paid for, and obviously paid for your internet connection, and obviously paid your rent, so that you can subsidize these fat voting bloc over-indoctrinated, lazy women that don't want to work. So if there's no incentive for them, this eventually is going to start escalating to something more. Be aware of it. Be prepared for it. So, do yourself a favor. I don't like when people become condescending and lecturing. And as much information as Jordan Maxwell has presented in various formats over the years, most of the time he's very, very mellow in his delivery. But occasionally, you can tell his patience is wearing thin, and when he says, do yourself a favor, read a book, learn how the world works. I'm attempting to resist to be on that level, but there, I understand where he's coming from. The more of us that take even one page out of that Social Security Act of, that governs this stuff, and read it, and memorize it, and quote and cite it, and reference statutes that have been applied wrongfully, the more of us that can be able to start actually making some kind of change. There are people out there attempting to make that change. Whether or not you like him and the information he provides, Amon Osiris is one. Vet Father Bill is another. Men Need to Be Heard is another. Surviving a Divorce for Dad is one account, and if I'm not mistaken, has a lot of positive interactions with lobbying efforts to get these issues addressed. Often providing updates as to, I met with X, Y, and Z, and they were receptive, blah, blah, blah. I've not been following them long enough to know if they've been getting results, but that's how you do it, is you take the actions that they've done, develop a metric. What was the goal? Have they achieved that goal? What were the obstacles from achieving that goal? What can be done to either remove that obstacle, go under that obstacle, over that obstacle, or around that obstacle? What can be done to remove that obstacle, go under that obstacle, go over that obstacle, go around that obstacle, in order to achieve the goals? Our society's birth rates are plummeting. For some reason, so many people bought into the lie that, and I have a suspicion as to why, that, we're overpopulated. Alright. I remember telling people this decades ago. Oh, we're overpopulated, blah, 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 congestion. And this was even in Astoria, Oregon. If you've ever been to Astoria, Oregon, you know there is no such thing as congestion. The only time is when the Young's Bay drawbridge is raised between Warrenton and Astoria, or there's an accident on the Astoria-Megler Bridge, the big Columbia River crossing there. Those are the only times of significance that there's any kind of traffic backup. It is essentially to accommodate water traffic or an accident. They do a run across the bridge. I'm aware of that, and that messes with it too. All right, so uh, why was I using that as an example? Oh, congestion. Yeah. Okay, so overpopulation. I apologize. I got caught up in my imagery, thinking of the from the Astor column, looking out over it all. If you have never seen it, it's worth checking out on a day such as this. It is magnificent. But one thing Astoria doesn't have is overpopulation. What it does have is overvalued property prices. And just like a lot of places, overvalued property prices everywhere. What's going on though? Oh, we're too crowded. No, with today's world, we're not overcrowded. You can survive. Heck, people survive for thousands of years in isolated communities. We are not overpopulated. We are underpopulated. All you have to do is get in a Cessna 172 and fly at 3,000 to 5,000 feet. Once you take off from the airport, all you're going to see is wild land. Rolling hills, water, lakes, rivers, streams, trees. You're going to see just land with grass and nothing on it. Drive 84. Go out Interstate 84. Get out, east of the Dalles. Get out to Biggs Junction. There's nothing out there except for 2 or 3 truck stops and a couple of restaurants and a mini mart and a bridge. And a few miles away from that is the Stonehenge replica and the Mary Hill Museum. But that's it. And there's the Washington Department of Transportation staging for the sand and gravel for icy season. But that's it. There's nothing else. Occasional houses here and there. Nothing. Just vacant land. Some of it being farmed. Get in like I said, get in a Cessna 172. Spend a few $100 and do a scenic tour of the Pacific Northwest, and you will find more raw land that is close to civilization that can be used to accommodate a so-called overpopulation. And I remember telling people this as I was, as I had been actively flying at the time, stating, there's no overcrowding. Oh yeah, there is, because it took me this long to get so many miles. No, you choose to live in an area that has more people. Well, that's overcrowding. No, you can move. I mean, heck, King County, people move out to, Highway 18, and then the one that connects Highway 18 to I-90. I forget the name of it, but it's a back road, or, it's an eastern side of the county. It runs about north-south. People are willing to drive that hour and a half from those homes because they can afford it there, in Buckley or whatever. They can afford the home in Buckley, but they can't afford it in Federal Way. Federal Way? Who would want to buy a place there to begin with? I mean, if you already live there and you own your home, good for you, but I remember working with a guy. He bought a home in an HOA. I can't remember if it was in Kent, Federal Way, Seattle itself, SeaTac, but at the time, this is 20 years ago, he worked for me. He made less money than me, but he was excited about his $2,200 a month mortgage payment. I was sick to my stomach when I heard how much he had to pay for a mortgage. That's not including the water bill, the garbage bill, the water, sewer. I suspect it was, if I remember right, it was an HOA, and I suspect that part of that $2,200 was his HOA fee too, but I could be mistaken. But my house payment was, I think for my duplex was $1,100, and my house payment was $500. So I had 3 properties that I was paying less on than what he was paying for his SFR, single family residence. I found that to be shocking. Anyway, so there's no overpopulation. It's just congestion because people choose to live in a concentrated area because supposedly that's where the jobs are. But in reality, we've been people have homesteaded for centuries, if not millennia, and survived. Yes, it is harsher. It is always doing something, but you got to really ask yourself, as you're sweating in a little metal box on a blacktop surface, not going anywhere, no air movement, just exhaust fumes getting all up into yourself. For what reason are you sacrificing your quality of life? Oh, because I don't want to work hard. I want to come home, pop open a cold one, kick back, raise my legs, and watch whatever. If that's what it is for you, have at it. That's not what it is for me. And I imagine quite a few of you also aspire to something more. And I would encourage you to find a way to pursue it. But be wary that these laws, if you do it in a marriage, that all this work will be for nothing. You will end up losing it and having to start over again. So be wary about that. But we can't keep ignoring it because the result will be more pronounced birth decline. And we will eradicate ourselves by laws, essentially, because we're willing to put up with draconian laws that make no sense, that are contrary to nature. Because that's really what it comes down to. People don't have any children because they can't afford them, and they have no place to let them do what it is that children need to do, and that is grow. Which is the reason I addressed the issue with the Social Security Act, that if we all got together and started reading, I read 2 pages, and you read one of the pages that I read, plus one of the next individual read one of the pages that the second individual read, and another page. And we get to a point where we are experts on each of those 2 pages. We can cite court precedent, we can cite how this is not the intention of the legislation, and we can begin to lobby for something to be changed. Unfortunately, it is my opinion, there is not enough time to do that.
Smart men realize their mistakes, and wise men realize others' mistakes.
No,
actually, let me see your phone.
you don't need to see my phone.
Yeah, take your phone.
You guys just told me you've been dating now for how long?
3 years.
Years. So, the reason I came up to you guys today is I wanted to ask you, are you down to see if your girlfriend is on a dating app right now?
I mean, yeah, sure. I'm on that.
I just feel like it's unnecessary.
Heck, yeah.
Whatever, fine.
Oh, yeah, so we're just going to be using Cheater Buster AI.
Her name's Lexi.
It's Lexi? Where's she from?
She's from Rockaway.
Through it all. This just came up. Was this your Tinder?
So I asked Rob before it had its mustache man, mechanized whatever debacle this past week. So a couple months ago I asked the Grok AI, is this Cheater Busters AI sampling that these channels provide, is it legitimate? Is it scripted? Grok's response was, it appears to be legitimate, that it is a real app, that these could be scripted, but most likely that they're not. I've been taking a break from it for right now because I've been focused on the chickens and a few other projects. I'm trying to locate an air compressor line for a DeVille behemoth-sized air compressor. Yeah, so I've got a few projects I've been attempting to get taken care of that has prevented me from pursuing more of that reading. But I've been doing the readings of the What Everybody is Saying, the Joe Navarro book on body language. I've been covering the Chase Hughes ellipsis behavioral table of elements. I've been incorporating the Paul Ekman's, Dr. Ekman's micro-expression training tool, the METT. I've been trying to find video footage from occasion that demonstrates, whether it's, Robert Crane, Bob Crane, whatever, from Hogan's Heroes, or Shatner from Star Trek. I like incorporating examples that people can be able to look at and say, oh, okay, that's what this is, But there are, and I'm often trying to advise people to use what I call litmus tests. I'm not a big fan of testing, because if you're romantically pursuing someone, and Paul Elam calls out romanticism is what's to blame for the failures. And if you follow him, read what he's writing about it, and you'll understand what I'm referring to. But if you are involved with someone with the prospects, if not already, being intimate and desiring of procreation, you don't want to have tests. You want to have trust. So you've got Gottman, Professor Emeritus from the University of Washington, who has written at length on what it is that goes into a successful relationship. You've got all of these examples of body language that I've provided to learn from. You've got Paul Elam writing about the perils of romanticism. You've got other people calling out the legal, concerns that need to be addressed. You have a wealth of information out there that I and others are providing to help you make a better informed decision. And the reason I'm bringing it up with the cheater busters is because I was, questioning whether this was legitimate or scripted, just for click clout type stuff, clickbait, whatever you want to call it. And the Grok AI, whether it's accurate or not on this, I don't know, but it claims that it appears to be legitimate. You always have to be doing your due diligence. Robert Glover wrote the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. I know him personally, and I can tell you that of his experiences, of his anecdotes, he puts them into the book, and he is very, very, what's the right word, sincere, adamant, that what you do at the beginning of the relationship, you be prepared to do throughout the relationship. If you open the door, be prepared to always open the door. So essentially, if you are a simp, be prepared to always be simping. If you're leading, be prepared to always be leading. That's all there is to it. But you always have to be doing your due diligence, and that is not turning a blind eye to questionable behavior. You can't let things slide. You have to call it out, and you have to be willing to walk away. And that has to be established early on, that no matter how invested one is in that relationship, it's never so deep an investment that you won't walk away. And that's what these cheater buster AI videos seem to be demonstrating, is those who are hurt and willing to walk away, and those who would rather ignore the pain and continue lying to themselves as they wither away. I don't know. I mean, things to consider.
What the
Does not
Is it
not
fair?
please.
He was active 3 weeks ago?
You should trust me over.
Watch these people's body language. Start pausing it, running it without sound. Watch the hand gestures. watch what's called distancing language. When somebody, the classic example is President Nixon making a speech, making a declarative statement, then taking a step back from the podium after he's done speaking. A lot of body language experts use this as an example of distancing language of somebody who said a word and then is backing away from it as if it is poisonous or radioactive. Learn to recognize these cues. You don't have to be confrontational in assessing, but learn to recognize when somebody's changing the topic, when they're running away, creating distance, attempting to what is commonly called gaslighting you, which is used so much that most people aren't aware of what it means. When somebody's gaslighting you, you confront them about, hey, I saw you on a dating app. That wasn't me. And besides, what are you doing on a dating app yourself? Why are you on there? That's a form of gaslighting where they're trying to shift the blame over. And you've got to be aware of that for what it is. If they're trying to deflect from taking responsibility for their own actions, it's better to assess the situation and most likely cut ties and move on. But you got to learn how to analyze this stuff without an emotional, but I'm so used to this person and waking up to them, I'm going to feel cold and empty without them by my side. If you hold a hot rock next to your side long enough, it's going to blister you. If it's radioactive, it's going to poison you. That's what you have to look at. Yeah, that hot rock's going to keep you warm, but it's going to give you cancer. So 5 years, you're holding on to that rock for 5 years, but cough, bleh, 6 feet under, because what could have been 50 plus years is now 5 years because you insisted on holding onto that hot rock rather than learning how to make a fire. Think of it that way.
You know what I mean? Let me see your ball.
No.
Actually, let me see your ball.
You don't need
No,
to
come on,
see
let me
my
see your
ball.
ball now.
You don't need
No,
to
yes,
see
I
my
do.
ball.
No, yo.
That's an app.
No.
It's fake. It's
No, it's not.
Nah, this is your info. This is...
Yo, no, it's not. No, come on, let me see your ball right now.
You don't need to see my ball. Fine, fine.
Kiss Jack.
No one.
Are you serious?
No one.
Oh my God, come on, yo, we're done, bro. No, get out.
Right here.
No, take your phone, take your money,
Right
get the f out of here. Get the f out of here.
We're
Oh my
done.
God.
She has the nerve to not only slap him, but also scream, "We're done," after he already dumped her, just so she can pretend she is in control. She is a waste of oxygen. Remember, fellas, the dating dynamic is the future marriage dynamic.
Yep. That's a good point. That is an absolutely good point. What he said, and this is part of the reason I have alluded to it in the past, and that is what is done at the beginning, be prepared for it for the rest of the relationship. This isn't just about your actions of whether you're leading or simping. These behaviors by both, okay, that's the misnomer. Any kind of relationship you have, most people think that it is man and woman. It is not man and woman. It is the man and all of his family, all of his friends, all of his experiences. It is the woman, all of her family, all of her experiences, and all of her friends. Now I changed the order up because there's a different set of priorities for both groups, and it's not a hard, it's not a hard written in stone rule, but the family is going to take the precedence over these other things most of the time for both men and women. But for women, it's the experiences that will take precedence over the friends, and for men, it's the friends that will take precedence over the experiences. men take experiences and file them in the file cabinet. A for automotive, B for basic survival, C for campfire, D for dangerous assessment, E for the opportunity to go elephant hunting, F for horizontal activities with floozies, and so on. You know, everything is most of the time categorized into various disciplines. This is either an experience that was fun, this was either a skills building opportunity, this was either, you know, so on and so forth. You know, so the priorities are different. Men, it's the family, friends, and those things that were the result of those associations. For women, it's the other way around. It's the family, then associations, and then the friends. Because a lot of time, what will happen is weak men will give up their friends. That's a feminine trait when they get into a relationship. And women will let their friends, in order to have a healthy, successful relationship, they will let their friendships drift away. Because the last thing you want is to be married and then have your wife associating with single women. She's going to be encouraged to participate in their antics, and it's going to destroy your relationship. You don't have to believe me. You just need to look at the evidence which exists. Is in your circle, you know at least one person that has had that experience, if not more. Yes, that is anecdotal. Anecdotal is lived experience, which on its surface is capable of being discounted. But if you start taking notes on these anecdotal trends and tracking them, you'll start to see a pattern.
Can you turn your camera around? I don't want to be in your video.
Okay.
Thank you.
I agree with her. I wouldn't want her in my video either. LOL.
AKA Men's Mental Health Awareness Day, and I would just like to tell y'all that I don't know what you're expecting here. This specific, issue bugs me so fucking much. Not because I don't think men's mental health is important, because I do, but because men seem to be sitting around and just waiting for a mental health movement to pop up. You can't be upset that there's no mainstream men's mental health movement, and every single time one pops up trying to address the root causes of why men's mental health is so bad, y'all start clowning on it. If y'all are not willing to take a stance against toxic masculinity, or this idea of roast culture, or this idea that you need to
Be aware. Be aware what it is that she's saying. She's saying that because men aren't falling in line with what is her prescriptive solution, you're not doing it right. And if you saw the picture, she's got the crazy eyes. So, number one, the things that you've experienced, if they've been traumatic, find the appropriate help that is necessary to help yourself, process that event, that experience, so that it's not ruling your life. This is a simplified example, but I've used it before in the past, and that's the two monks walking who come across a woman who is attempting to cross a stream but can't get through. The monks, having taken a vow of chastity, aren't supposed to interact with women, but the one monk offers to carry the woman across on his shoulders. They cross. She is, she comes off of his shoulders, and they part their ways. Miles down the road, the other monk is still caught up that the monk, the other one, the first one, had allowed that woman to sit on his shoulders. To which the retort is, I dropped her off at the riverbank. For what reason are you still carrying her? There are people, as I said before, you're going to be stuck with that you have no choice but to interact. Jobs are those places. School is another of those places. And that is, you have no control over who has been hired, quite often, that you have to interact with, or who is enrolled in the program of which you are enrolled. And you have to deal with their absurdity at times, their incompetence, their showboating, whatever. You know, there's something about them that is distracting or bringing down the whole endeavor. Otherwise, just avoid it. You know, just don't deal with them. But more to the point, for the mental health, don't let it rule your life. Find the help that you need so it's not governing your life. And don't let somebody else drag you down to their level. Do take responsibility for what it is. You know, if you've got a drinking problem, a drug problem, a money spending problem, whatever, take responsibility for the actions that put you in the position of which you exist. Don't associate with people that accommodate your excuses and expect you to accommodate theirs. The number one solution, in my opinion, is by taking responsibility. Not, you know, self-flagellation, you know, beating yourself up. That doesn't do anything. What does do something, and I've mentioned it before, and that is, you know, similar to Dr. Peterson's thing, make your bed. Make your immediate environment, you know, you can do the most change on your immediate environment. Make your bed, clean your room, and begin moving outward from there. Once those things have become an established habit, I mean, I'll give you an example. I grew up in a household where the laundry would be washed but never folded. It would just sit on the couch. I lived in a home where the dishes were just put in the sink, and then it would pile up into both basins of the sink and then onto the counter before anybody would bother to wash them. This was the example I was shown growing up. I had to learn as an adult that's not how it's done. Last night, before going to bed, had a bowl, a fork, a spoon, and a knife. That was all that was in the sink. They were washed before going to bed. This morning, I got up. One of the first things I did was make my bed. I think I turned the coffee pot on first, went to the bathroom, opened the door so the cats could go outside, and then I made my bed. But these routines have become so ingrained for me that it's difficult to just go to bed knowing that there's a dish in the sink. Even one dish. It's become so routine, so habitualized for me that I can't operate knowing that. Oh, and I watered the plants. I watered my garden plants this morning. But I did that after making my bed. But these routines, these patterns were done, have been done, are done. I've been doing it for so long now that it bothers me. It's not quite the fingernails on the chalkboard sensation, but it's a very weak, mild version of that. It makes me uncomfortable knowing that it's an unfinished task. And you'd be like, well, that seems pretty danged, retentive. You know, that's fine. But the bottom line is, you know, I got 12 chickens in here with me. I have to clean. Right now I'm looking at the pellet dirt that they kicked out of the kennel. I've got their water that I have to refill, you know, their seed that I have to refill. But you know, I have to take actions to keep the dust down. In fact, I was making a comment about the air compressor. You know, one of the things is once they go outside, you need the air compressor to help blow off the feathers and the dust. And I need to get a hold of a shop vac to counter the last nearly 2 months of their occupation. And I'm not complaining, mind you. This is a minimum once a day, twice a day action of sweeping things up and getting the stuff out of here so that the cats aren't affected by it, I'm not affected by it, and also, to a certain degree, it is a motivator as to why the dishes are done, why the bed is made, because if the bed's made, then the dust settles on the cover sheet, not where I'm sleeping. But the reason I say that is developing habits and routines helps relieve pressure on what it is that is dragging you down. And it allows you to deal and process that information. It's not going to be a cure-all for everybody, but, you know, mental health is important. And if you don't, you know, if you have these things dragging you down, it's going to negatively impact your interactions with every level of society and the environment. So don't let these people be negative. You don't have to do it her way. You don't have to do it my way. Do it in a way that is effective for you. I use mine as an example of what works for me. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then find a system that works for you. But as a side note, if you're a man, never take advice, never entertain the opinions of those who exhibit crazy eyes.
You man, y'all are not going to create a working mental health movement. Instead of complaining about the lack of a movement, create one.
It's only to men that we would say, stop waiting around and do something about it. It's only to men that we would say, stop complaining about it. You're not the only one.
I'm going to be honest here. We aren't waiting for a movement. We're waiting for someone to actually still give a damn about us after we open up. There was a church here that ran a thing to help men support each other. Women took to showing up to the gatherings, filming the men going in and saying things like, if this were my man, I'd leave him. And they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And men can have their support group when they solve male privilege.
This woman shocked her boyfriend by cutting his hair, and that's when everything changed. What happened next will leave you speechless. It was a red flag.
Look how long we answered. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
What this is a woman who cuts a man's hair and he's getting upset, and she's saying this is retaliation. So instead of handling it as adults, they're acting as spoiled children. Unfortunately, we don't walk around with little, green lights, red lights, resumes or profiles that demonstrate what it is, how we behave, how we're going to perform in a stressful situation. And I've told people, I'm more confrontational. I'm not combative. I'm more confrontational. There's a difference. Other people are, backstabbers. Other people are manipulative. Other people will run away. There's a whole range, a whole gamut of possibilities, and you're never going to be one thing. You're going to be different aspects of these things, and depending on what the situation will determine. If it's something that you have training in, as I have made reference to about the aircraft incident where the flight engineer was found unconscious, you know, environments of which you're trained, you're going to respond a certain way, and that's usually in a manner that exhibits confidence. If it is a situation that you have no skills, you're probably going to act more emotional, more panicked, and it's up to you to govern those feelings so that you can recognize good information, good solutions, and act upon them. But these two are exhibiting poor communication and behavior. And what it comes down to is she's mad that he burned her stuff. She doesn't identify what stuff. You know, he could have taken the trash outside and burnt it for all we know. But that was her stuff. How dare he burn her garbage? Who knows? But instead of being an adult and separating herself from that and saying, look, you crossed a boundary, you destroyed my personal property, that's unacceptable, you either remedy the situation or we're done. Instead of handling it as an adult in such a manner, she physically attacks him because, but it's only hair. She used scissors, a weapon, to damage his body, his hair. Both reactions are inappropriate. Hers is the more egregious because instead of dealing with it in a proper manner, she decided to retaliate and hurt him. And recognize such behaviors from people. And again, no matter how deep you suspect, no matter how deep you're invested, you have to be willing to walk away from abuse.
Not gonna lie, I'm breaking up with her for that. You can buy whatever he burned of hers, but you can't buy your real hair back.
No, but it will grow back. That is the other part. And we're presuming that it is an item that can be replaced. There could be a sentimental connection, a family member who has passed that is no longer here and it was their property originally or something. There are pieces of information that aren't being provided. And this is the reason I suspect both parties are acting inappropriate. Or, to me, they're acting inappropriate. But again, she is the one that is more egregious because instead of her walking away from that transgression, she chose to retaliate instead. And that is pettiness. That is immature. It's not adult behavior.
But it feels good to get revenge.
No. Whether you like her or not, what's her name? Katie Holmes. Revenge isn't about justice. Revenge is about making you feel good. Justice is about having, seeking, can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but essentially, revenge is about making you feel good. That's not justice. And that's what it all comes down to, is it's self-serving. That's why she did what she did. It was self-serving. It had nothing to do with balancing the scales of fate. It had everything to do with making herself feel good. She had lost power because of the stuff being burnt. She wanted to retaliate but because of the actions of both, they're both immature. If it was an accident on his part, she needs to let it go and decide if she's going to let the whole relationship go or forgive and move on from that moment and just be an adult. Don't accept bad treatment from people. You know, if you're late for work and you get mad because you're being reprimanded for it, don't be late for work. If you're on time for work and you're still being called out for it, that something's your fault, walk away. Recognize what it is within your ability to control and take responsibility.
If he gave you a guilt-free pass to sleep with anybody in the world, would you use it?
Yes.
On who?
Zac Efron, Josh Bowman, some celebrity, hot celebrity. You turn that down? Couldn't do it.
Alright, what if it was all the way around? I know it on one night with one celebrity doesn't change who I am. So you wouldn't use it.
Even if
There's
I
no
did
point.
it to you?
No. Because it sounds like a trap. It just...
You've probably seen this one before. It's, you know, one of those couples on the street interviews, whether that's scripted or not, I have no idea. What you're finding, though, is that the men are saying no. It sounds as if it's a trap. I'm old enough to remember that amongst my friends, that was one of the jokes of, okay, you had a guilt-free press. Would you with Cindy Crawford or, you know, whoever the celebrity card at the time that was attractive, you know, Pamela Anderson or whatever, you know. And it's like, yeah, you're lying. You know you would, you know. But I'm not saying that these guys are being disingenuous. That's not what I'm implying. There's a joke. There's an old joke or lesson, you know, thing that goes along the same lines of a couple says something to the effect of, if you got a guilt-free pass, would you do it? And I can't, for some reason I'm thinking it was the wife that said, oh yeah, and I would do it with this millionaire, this billionaire, this actor, this athlete, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Pick one, and if that opportunity is there, you can act upon it. And they, you know, they pick one. And let's say it's Clyde Drexler, former center of the Portland Trail Blazers. And then the husband is like, okay, now it's your turn. Who's yours? So-and-so, the lady next that lives across the street from us, or next door. And the moral of the story is that the one person, the woman, picked the more outlandish, the one that was least likely to happen, because, you know, the presumption was, the likelihood of, number one, you meeting this celebrity card, athlete, whatever, was minimal. The likelihood, and then followed by how likely would they be able to be intimate, was even less of a chance. This is how much society's changed in the last 40 years, if you're not picking up on that. Is that with social media, it's become very obvious that there's certain leverages that have always existed that we were naive and or outright ignored. But the man choosing the neighbor made it more realistic. That the likelihood was that at some point in time that it could legitimately happen. But because it was the guilt-free pass and it was given the blanket permission, his was the more likely to actually happen. And it put a wet blanket over her fantasy. So the reason I bring that up is, one is a commentary of how society has changed. You know, my own anecdotal experiences of, yeah, You know, you crawl through the desert in broken glass just to do a nocturnal behavior in their shadow. You know, those types of middle school jokes. Um, and what that is that's projection. That's somebody who's trying to make themselves feel better for, what's the word? Um, lusting after someone. So, but what you're seeing, though, one of my concerns is, are you seeing these men being profiled? Is this a result of the feminization of men, the dominance of female-led households, and the lack of masculinity, the lower testosterone levels, or is this just who men have been, and they're becoming more and more revealed because the fraternal shaming isn't as pronounced now as it had been in the past.
Significant other is going to give you one night.
You can see it in this man's face, the level of disappointment that he has in his lady's answer. But even through that silent hurt, he gives an authentic answer instead of one that he thinks will also hurt her.
She just did you a favor, Guy. She showed you her true nature. Now walk away and leave her for the streets. His words cut her far deeper than hers did him. He showed he's better than her and deserves better.
And ultimately, if that's a true statement, that if he deserves better, if he believes he's making the right choice, the correct action is to separate himself from somebody such as her. But what if they've been together for 6 months or 6 years? Blah, 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 blah. Number one, respect is earned, it's not given. Number two, when somebody's disrespected you, that falls in line with Gottman's research that demonstrates the likelihood of Gottman, look up Gottman and his research on relationships. He was able to accurately predict the likelihood of success failures of relationships with over 90% accuracy. I could be mistaken. I want to say it was over 95%. Think about that. His ability to analyze relationships was so accurate as to be greater than 90, maybe even 95%. And the biggest radioactive sign was contempt, disrespect, disregarding, dismissing those actions exhibited by the other in the relationship.
When we have a society full of women with no accountability, guess what? It just repeats the cycle. And then the daughters grow up same exact way. We're teaching our daughters how to be queens instead of being wives. Teaching young men to be gentlemen, to be providers, to pay for everything, to open the doors. Meanwhile, we're telling our daughters, know your worth and never settle. So one side's learning selflessness, the other side's learning self-prioritization. But unfortunately, little girls are taught what do they deserve versus what do they also bring to the relationship. And I'm raising a protector and a provider, and the last thing I want is my son to end up with your dusty daughter thinking that being submissive to a good man is oppression. Last I checked, equality doesn't mean that women get to wear the crown while men get to carry the cross.
One of the things you're going to find in society is mothers who raise sons who are actually observing these patterns in sociology. And that is everything that she just described. Where does this level of entitlement originate? And how does it persist? And for what reason would I ever allow my child to be your slave? You find this happening more and more with men. I constantly advocate for men to put themselves first, and that is learn skills, cancel a vice, and the best way to end a vice, a bad habit, is by replacing it with a positive habit. You want to give up smoking? Well, start sweeping, start painting. Every time you want to pick up that cigarette, pick up the paintbrush instead. Oh, but my painting sucked. Yeah, I get that. But so did smoking when you first started. You had, you coughed and, because your body was trying to reject it. Replacing the habit with a positive habit is going to help you be more successful. That's part of the reason people who quit smoking get fat, is they put down the cigarette and they pick up the donut. So instead of picking up the donut, pick up the paintbrush, pick up the pencil, pick up the chisel, pick up something and learn a new skill to replace the old bad habit. Put yourself first. I know an individual who is such a severe chain smoker that I suspect they are a drug addict. I've never known anybody to chain smoke without being a drug addict, and I've never known anybody who has to always have a cigarette in their mouth and it not even be fully burnt down before they're lighting the next one with that burning down cigarette, ready to put it in their mouth. That is how severe of a chain smoker this individual. The only people that do that, in my experience, are drug addicts. Oh, I've never done drugs. But your significant other and your child both died of ODs. Birds of a feather flock together. There's a saying among the drug community. You do the drug, so, don't let the drug do you. Do the drug, don't let the drug do you. 90+% of the people fail at that. And the example I just gave of the chain smoker is somebody who lets the cigarette dictate their life. They go to the bar every night. Their cheeks are rosy. All they hire is people from the bar and then wonder why their world is falling apart. Birds of a feather flock together. If your priority is the drug, whether it's the smoking, the meth, the alcohol, that will always be the priority. You have to get that priority shifted to something that's going to benefit you. You can be the greatest craftsman in the world, but nobody's going to care if you've got the shakes because you need your next fix, your next hit. Nobody wants that in their home. Nobody wants that in their job site. That's too much of a risk, too much of a liability. How does this relate to relationships, though? Is that a lot of people get into this rut of there's nothing out there for me. Women only want the top 5%, top 2%, top 1% of men. Tinder just changed it so that women can only search for 6 foot and over. Well, it is what it is. First of all, if you're wasting your time with a dating app, that's your first mistake. Second mistake is giving a crap what it is others think. Who cares if they're looking for somebody over 6 feet? Who cares if they're looking for somebody, that they can, be lazy and do all the work for them? You have to learn how to discern, you need to learn to separate it, and you need to learn not to let your emotions govern your life. It's the reason I brought up the chain smoker example. This is somebody who lets their emotions dictate everything about them. It's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. You You can exist in that world if you want. I choose not to. I'm going to give you another example. I stopped somewhere to get lunch recently. They saw me at the counter as I placed my order. Their face, her face lit up. Never really talked to this individual other than saying hi, in passing, as I've been there before. They took my order. When it came up, she walked from behind the counter right over to me, handed it to me. Whether or not that signifies anything, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that the majority of people would stay at the counter and just grab the item and be like, okay, here you go, and hand it off. But because she brought it all the way out, demonstrates either one, a higher level of customer service, or two, a level of interest. Or both. Well, no. Bottom line is, you got to learn how to recognize these cues so that you can properly separate those that are genuinely interested, genuinely attracted, from those who are just looking for a carriage ride, for you to carry them on your back and support them as they do nothing but gain weight. So, drop the vice, learn a skill, and learn how to separate those who are going to take advantage of you and those who want to benefit you by being part of your world. That's all it really comes down to.
Protect this woman at all costs. She gets it. Truth. Men are taught very early in childhood how to treat women. In contrast, women are never taught how to treat men, only what to expect. It's selflessness versus selfishness. What's your biggest fear?
Marrying a loser who makes me go 50-50, work a 9 to 5, then go home to do all the cooking, cleaning, and childcare.
She still fears the same thing she feared when she was 18. Someone tell her she doesn't need to fear it anymore.
Did you feel comfortable if your father was watching you all this time and you fell into it? You would not feel comfortable, and I'll tell you why. That's because in your heart of hearts, in your soul, if you still got one, you know it's wrong. And I'll give you an example.
If you can't hear it, it's the Whatever podcast. It's the bald black man. I don't know his name, but he's been referenced from this podcast often. And this time he's calling out the OF woman performer that would you feel comfortable if your father was viewing this? And he's saying, no, you wouldn't, and I'll give you an example as to the reason. This individual has said things in the past that are very poignant, and that is, all you have to offer is your starfish. If you had something of value to offer the world to make money, then that's what you would be doing. But since you don't, all you offer is your starfish for people to look at. Not something you earned, not something you built, not some skill you've developed, but what has come to you via genetics. And the woman does, you're right, I'm good for nothing. The pity, oh, yeah, you're right, the mocking of, you're right, I'm just a pathetic loser, which is essentially a veiled, how dare you call me out for being a harlot. But he continues on challenging. So I don't know if that's what this is leading into, but this is the same man. These pearls of wisdom of which you are here, which you may not be able to hear, are worthy of taking note. Man or woman, these are worthy of taking note because they are addressing what it is that is being done. Number one, if you had a skill, then you would be utilizing that skill to survive. Number two, these weak individuals, man or woman, who are paying the money towards these people are just as much to blame as those who are providing it. Now, granted, you can kill the whole thing by not providing it, but there's a lot of opportunistic individuals out there who would be like, look, I can get paid a lot of money for doing nothing. So the best way to end it is by not funding it.
That's your work. It's my work. If my mother consumed my work, I'd be thankful and pleased that she took an interest in my work and supported my work. If she bought my house, I'd be thankful.
So he goes on and states that in my work, my mother, if she consumed my work, I would be pleased and thankful. And I'll give a couple of anecdotes. One is the yield from my garden. I was able to give strawberries that I had produced from my garden to my mother. And another time, I had helped buy a carpet cleaning tool and was able to demonstrate the effectiveness of it to my mother. And seeing that smile on her face of, wow, this is really good, you know, that was pleasing to be, you know, hey, this is good. My mother is pleased with the result of the work being performed. Yes, you know, you could be like, oh, you're just seeking validation, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I think everybody wants to feel validated by their parent that they are, on some level, successful. Now, granted, ultimately what it comes down to is, in order to be successful, you got to be able to be successful. You know, do you have people out there that are actually recruiting you, hiring you, seeking you out? And if you do, then yes, you're being successful. So it's not enough just to have the parent I just needed to check the side eye of that chicken. It looked like it was closed as if they had something in it. But nope, their eyes are fully open. You know, yeah, you can see it's a validation thing. But to know that it was a skill that could be marketable and transferred in that way was more what it came down to. And I was able to use that device on the rental properties to keep them maintained. So that was good. Anyway, so the anecdote is there. The crop yield, the carpet cleaning, those levels of tools and such. So, yeah, is it something that you would want your parent consuming? Now, granted, I have met people who sold illegal substances to their children and or their parent, and it's a shared recreation thing, and it's like, yikes. But it's that whole, but this family member is so thankful, you know, it's like, thankful for what? That you're helping contribute to their demise? That's not exactly something to be proud of there, champ. I don't know. But that's what he's describing. So if you can't hear what he's saying, that's what he's saying. What I'm producing, I would be thankful if my mother was a client, a customer, and was benefiting of that item, of that service. And he's, you know, calling her out, saying that if your mother or father bought your product, being the starfish display online, that if your parent was paying for it, you'd be disgusted and or ashamed. And I would challenge that, because we've seen examples that some of these individuals do incorporate their children to be their producers or filmographers, or their parent to be their managers or responsible for the cleanups. You know, it's very disgusting. And what that demonstrates is that they had a moral failing in their upbringing already, either by their own actions of how they're raising their own children, or by how they were raised.
Prostitution is one thing, but being public and acting proud about it is next level wicked. And that's it for today on Sigma Traits. Make sure you hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that notification bell Support this channel through membership. You can also support through PayPal link in the description. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Alright, so the previous video was about 20-some minutes. This one is 100 minutes. I wanted to keep this one shorter, but as I stated at the beginning, that probably would have got, knowing me, as I'm commenting on these other videos, they do go longer because I have opinions on the subtopics inside the videos. But I want to go with, in closing, that in order to combat population decline, you have to have children. In order to have children, you have to interact with somebody of the opposite sex. Marriage is not a tenable situation for men, as it is essentially legalized, government-enforced theft. That allows wealth transfer for even the shortest amount of time. You're married for 2 weeks in some cases, 6 months in others. What is it, California? You're entitled to 50% of your retirement after 10 years. You've got these archaic laws in existence that say what it is you've earned is now the property of others. I've gone to these courts with other men and taken notes of these cases as theirs and others have been addressed, where it doesn't matter that it was split 50-50 already 10 years ago. It's that the woman is overspending, and then they order the man to cough up what remains of that other 50% to her, leaving him with 25% of what he built, or nothing. There is no value in being in a traditional relationship. And I've encouraged all of others to join the ranks, to start reading sections of the Social Security Act and these court precedents, to find where it is that these things can be remedied, they can be corrected and addressed. I called out weak leadership in the form of Mike Johnson and others, that they are the problem. By electing weak leaders, that is the problem. And you got Ted Cruz, he's weak. Well, he sounds tough. He's not tough. You don't get that flabby without being weak. And I'm not going to apologize for it. I've had my weight issues in the past. But the bottom line is as Huckabee titled his book, Put Down the Fort. I think that's the title of his book when he lost weight. Put Down the Fort. That's really the key to success. Even Limbaugh had said it. The key to weight loss is not eating as much. You track what it is you're taking in, you're going to lose weight. But somebody such as Mike Johnson, he's a weak leader. Ted Cruz is a flabby, weak leader. I have to call these people out on the right, not to gang up on them, but because a lot of people associate Republicans as being, but they're tough on crime. No, they're not. They're enabling it. If they were really tough on crime, they'd be calling for the immediate release of these lists and the documents to be handled properly. They would be calling, they wouldn't be allowing, granted this is over a decade ago, they wouldn't be allowing Obama to send a plane full of cash to Iran, and then 15 years later, bombing them. But that was a different Congress. It doesn't matter. Weak leadership is still weak leadership. You don't give them cash that then allows them to fund their programs just so you can justify bombing it. This is not leadership. It is money laundering. So going back to it, marriage is a trap for men. It's a wealth transfer scheme that rewards and incentivizes the woman in the relationship to file for the slightest slight, and it's government that backs her up by force, that we don't care. We don't care who's right or wrong. You're wrong by virtue of being a man. Men are giving up as a result and retreating to secret fraternities, not like the Freemasons or the Moose Lodge or anything secret in that regard, but in the sense of not publicizing that they are forming close-knit groups of other, with other men to play games or, do get-togethers. They don't feel that they have options, and what options they have are too risky to be entering. A lot of things to ponder coming up on 106 minutes. Thank you for checking out the chickens. As you can see, they're doing well. They're excited to be sitting in daylight, and they're very vocal. And their tongues are intact without strings wrapped around them. That was remedied and seems to be more traumatizing to me than it was to any of them. So hopefully within another 2 months they'll start producing eggs. And I'm looking forward to that. Have a good day. I'll probably put out some more to be uploaded for this day or